Now look at your Bible, 2 Samuel chapter 9, at the story of Mephibosheth. Is this all right? I can see you're listening, but I can't see if you're agreeing. It won't matter if you're not agreeing. I'm going to finish it anyway. I have a one-track mind when I get in the pulpit. The story is now that David's mighty men have taken Jerusalem. He is now the king of the United Nation. He has a capital. He is secure. Now David says, "Is there anyone left who is in the house of Saul, that I may show him kindness for Jonathan's sake?" And there was a servant of the house of Saul whose name was Ziba. And so when they had called him to David, the king said to him, "Are you Ziba?" Now I hope you've got a pencil or a pen, because I'm going to ask you to take note of, maybe even mark, a couple of key words as we go through this passage. And Ziba said, "At your service." And then the king said, "Is there not still someone of the house of Saul to whom I may show the kindness of God?" And Ziba said to the king, "There is still a son of Jonathan who is lame in his feet." And so David said to him, and I'm sure this was an excited tone in his voice, "Where is he?" And Ziba said to the king, "Indeed, he is in the house of Machir, the son of Ammiel, in Lodebar." First term to mark is lame in verse 3. Second is Lodebar in verse 4. Verse 5 says, "Then David sent and brought him out of the house of Machir, the son of Ammiel, from Lodebar." I'd like for you to mark these two words. Take note of these two words, sent and brought. Sent and brought. Now when Mephibosheth, the son of Jonathan, the son of Saul, had come to David, he fell on his face and prostrated himself. And then David said, "Mephibosheth?" And he answered, "Here is your servant." So David said to him, "Do not fear, for I will surely show you kindness for Jonathan your father's sake, and will restore to you all the land of Saul your grandfather, and you shall eat bread at my table continually." And then he bowed himself and said, "What is your servant that you should look upon?" And here's the last phrase to take note of: "A dead dog. Such a dead dog as I." Now you should have marked the terms, or taken note of the terms lame, Lodebar, sent, brought, and dead dog. Let me just explain those terms and then we'll bring this to an end, because they have implications for how we live our lives in relationship to the dropped people out there. The word lame literally means stricken or smitten. Stricken or smitten. Something awful, something violent has happened that has rendered you lame, crippled, or it is sometimes translated contrite, which means broken. Lodebar. Where did this lame son of Jonathan end up? Debar means pasture. David was a shepherd boy. Debar means pasture. Lo means not. The name of this place was, and this is not very inviting, not a pasture. He lived in a place called not a pasture. And if the church is a pasture and the pastor is a shepherd, that's where we get our name. He was out of church. There was no church. There was no place where he could be watched, where he could have fellowship, where he could be encouraged, where he could be taught, where he could be fed, where he could be protected, where he could be prayed over. And there are a lot of people out there living in Lodebar, dropped people with no pasture. And David sent and brought him out of Lodebar. That's not a very good translation of either one of those terms. The word sent is more than just going, "I'm the king, go get him, I've got power." The term sent means stretched. David stretched his authority, stretched himself, reached out to that man. And that word brought is best translated by a word we don't use much anymore unless we're throwing sticks to a dog. Fetched. Now, wouldn't it read better if it said David stretched and fetched? Or think about that for a minute. David stretched out and he fetched and he brought back something that he wanted. And when Mephibosheth got there, he said, "Don't put me at the table. You don't know who you're dealing with. I'm just a dead dog. Why should you be interested in me?" 2 words put together, dead dog. Dead literally means to die an unnatural death, not a natural death. Tony can tell you that there's a big difference between a funeral for someone who's died a natural death and someone who's died an unnatural death. It could be used for someone who was executed. It could be used for someone who died prematurely, an unnatural death. I'm an unnaturally dead dog. Now, dog meant dog. But it was also used as a metaphor, as a general term of contempt. They're nothing but a dog. You're a dog. Don't come here. In particular, it was used to describe people who had been damaged by an unworldly church system and had become sacrifices upon the altar to idols, or who became temple prostitutes. They were dogs in the eyes of righteous people. You don't want me. I'm a dead dog. Drop your eye down in that chapter to the middle of verse 11. And in response, David said, "As for Mephibosheth, he shall eat at my table like one of the king's sons." That's how you treat a dropped person. Mephibosheth also had a young son whose name was Micah. I've never heard this preached on, never heard him mentioned. Many of the dropped people out there have children. And they too are suffering from the damage done to their parents. And we need to reach out to them as well. And all who dwelt in the house of Ziba were servants of Mephibosheth, and Mephibosheth dwelt in Jerusalem, for he ate continually at the king's table. And yet, note that he was still lame in both of his feet. How did Mephibosheth feel about David? We find in chapter 19 of 2 Samuel this expression. He said, "David has been an angel of God to me." What does angel mean? It literally means messenger. David was called to be a messenger of God to him. Now, there are many here in church this morning, like those who came to David in the cave of Adullam, distressed, in debt, discontented, or you came here out of some combination of several of these. I know I did. We came hurting, but not hopeless. But you see, the key is, for me and for you, is that we could come. We could come. And I know that the Lord is making mighty men and women of God out of us to fight in His army. But before we run out looking for new giants to slay and new kingdoms to conquer, why don't we do like David and take some time to remember those who have been more wounded than we are? Those who have been dropped and so damaged in their bodies or in their minds or in both that they cannot make their way here as we did. Dropped by their parents who abandoned them or abused them or ignored them or lied to them. Dropped by a husband or a wife who just up and rejected you and abandoned you. Dropped by life, by an accident at work, by an injury at war, by a perverted predator when you were young and flirting with the world, by a phone call in the middle of the night telling you your pride and joy was gone.